Do you know what are the biggest trends in customer experience right now? I don't, but our guest might. We're speaking today with Esteban Kolsky, Chief Evangelist at SAP Customer Experience. Welcome to another episode of the CX Show. We usually start with me doing...
I'm ready.
Go for it, Esteban. Hi Esteban, it's great to have you on the show. I'm glad we could catch you before you are too famous because you've lately been all over the place.
It's a little too late. I'm already way too famous, but okay, thank you.
Okay, that I'm glad that we're not paying you for this interview, just for
That's
those.
the right way to do it, yeah.
And I was thinking how we can kick off this conversation, and then I thought about something that I saw you posted on LinkedIn a while ago when you were just appointed Chief Evangelist at SAP Customer Experience, and you mentioned that the main job of an evangelist is to start conversations. And I thought, yeah,
Correct.
That's interesting. And then I thought how easy it is nowadays to start a conversation with all the social media, right? What you basically do is like, if you're capable of writing and talking, and then you manage to gather a big network on your social media, then you post some of your thoughtful thoughts, and voila, you are a thought leader and an influencer. And I was thinking in this case, why companies like ours need people like you to be an official evangelist?
Well, so two parts to that answer. Number one, it's easy to start a conversation, but it's not that easy to start the right conversation, right? And that's a key difference here. You want to have the right conversations in setups when you're actually trying to do some selling. For example, if you're going to go and buy a car, you want to go into the location where you buy the car, knowing as much as you possibly can about a car, and you want to buy the car on your terms, right? You want to know how much you're going to pay, what features you're going to get, the color that you want, and all these things. If you don't have the right conversation, you're going to go home with like a red car that you don't like, that doesn't run, and that requires to go to the shop every week, right? So the difference is like the conversation is what makes the difference in the commercial interaction, right? And the reason company like ours need that is because one of the biggest problems that we have going into a customer account, going into a conversation, is that we follow somebody else and then we're having a different conversation. Okay, so let's go back to the car example. Let's say that, you know, a person who just got the first job and has a lot of money in their pocket wants to buy a sports car and goes into the dealership and talks about buying a sports car. And then you come right behind them and you want to buy a minivan, but instead they say, no, we're going to sell you a sports car because that's what the guy talked about, right? So that's the difference between having an evangelist and not. It's like, you know, if my job is to start conversations, my job is more like starting the right conversation, setting the background so that when we go in to have this conversation with our customers, we have a good playing field from where we can actually have the sell the product.
Okay. Well, thank you for the example. I really like, because I watched some of your interviews that were available out there, and I thought that's great, like about Esteban, that he can explain even complex scenarios and like complex things related to business in easy to follow terms.
A friend of mine calls me a chief explainer officer. So maybe I do it too much.
Maybe that's the next title, right? Like you're gonna stay a chief evangelist for a while, and then like we'll promote you to. Yeah. Conversations. What are then the conversations that we must be having? What are the right ones?
Well, that's a great question. What are the right conversations, right? I mean, we've been talking about customer experience for nearly 20 years. I was a Gartner in 2001 when we published the first report on customer experience management, and since then we've been trying to figure out how to do this right. The right conversation on customer experience is not what it is, but how does the business get leverage out of that? How does the business get value out of that? And at the same time, how does the customer get value out of that? We have shifted our businesses from a model where it was all about the company value, like what the company does for results for the company, to trying to find the balance between what the company needs and what the customer needs, and how do you balance those two together. So, we went from saying, this is going to be your experience because this is what works for us, to actually saying, okay, let's find out what you need. Let's try to understand you and then deliver to you the experiences that you're looking for, right? So those are the conversations that we need to have. Not what is an experience, but how do we find this balanced model with technology assisting us to actually get these things done properly.
Well, that's interesting that you brought up customers. And I used to work in development before I came to communications and then to marketing. And now I'm thinking about some funny cases that we had back in development. Thinking about customers, what customer wants and what customer actually needs. And if we take like a hypothetical contact center, for example, because that's what my team was working on. A customer, for example, reaches out to us and says like, hey guys, there have been complaints that our customers have to wait a long time in queues on phone to get to an agent. And we are thinking like everyone is using messengers right now. Let's have an integration with some of the best messengers out there on the market. And then, then our customers don't have to queue any longer because they can instantly get replies from an agent. And then we started like thinking about it, the team like, is it really going to solve the problem? And then we realized that, well, a customer wants to have an integration with a messenger. But like, does he really need it? Because like, probably the problem is not going to be solved, right? Because the problem could be that they don't have enough agents, and even if they have this like messaging in place, people are going to wait to get like a text message, right? Or like on WhatsApp or whatever from an agent because they don't have enough agents. Or maybe like if you dig even deeper, probably they have to work on their services and products, and then they won't have so many complaints and so many people trying to get to a contact center. And that's for me, like, we didn't find a solution as a development team, right? Like how to balance between the requests from a customer, because customer always knows, like always knows what he wants, but like how to bring them to the point to help them solve their real needs.
Well, but see, you just run through the entire, I could have said that, I couldn't have said it better, but at the same time, you just run through the entire problem that we're facing today, which is the company thinks that it understands the customers and what the customer needs. For example, when you said, hey, let's put Messenger in there, let's put WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger or whatever as a solution, that's what the company thinks that the customer is asking for. But the customer's needs and requirements have not changed. The difference is like instead of having the company go and explore why they're having that problem, like you said, maybe they don't have enough agents, maybe the agents are not properly trained, maybe the agents are not properly compensated, they don't have the right information, maybe they have too few agents that are training the right channels. So instead of actually figuring out what that is, we assume that we know what the problem is and how to solve it. And this has been the problem. This has been like the problem with CX and CRM for 25 years. It's like we think that the technology is going to be the solution. And if we just add one more channel or we add one more feature or hey, but this screen is really going to make the difference, right? And then we end up like, with a mess of like, a morass of things that don't do anything but solve the problem. And what the customer wants, the only thing that the customer wants every single time for the last 45 years, the only thing that the customer wants is a quick answer that is accurate and that solves the problem that they have, right? Whether we're talking about marketing transactions, sales transactions, commerce transactions, service transactions, or whatever it is. If you know me, you understand what I need, and then you let me get it the best way possible, and that's all that CX is supposed to do. So all these conversations about like how many more channels and doing this and doing that, those are internal company ideas, but they're not really the solution that the customer is looking for. I mean, of course, when you speak of the customer, you speak about people who buy from us, the software vendor. When I speak of the customer, I speak of the people who buy from the people who buy from me. So my customer's customer, that should be the ultimate goal.
Okay, all right. Well, some interesting points there, and I know sometimes we are doing a disservice to ourselves trying to create so many features, right? Because like maybe it's like psychologically it's easier, right? Especially when you go in to sell something, like you go to a potential to a prospect and say, you know what, we have this and this and this and this and this and this, and customer's like, wow, like I want to have the software that has it all. Like, are you going to use it? Probably not. So some like really hype features like artificial intelligence, like everywhere we should have artificial intelligence right now because it's a hype thing. But like, I think we shouldn't go. You're right. Like go through these like following this easy path, right, and trying to like check mark as many boxes like as we can. But understanding what are the real needs of customers is much more difficult, I think. So like, how can we do it?
Yeah. So and that's. It's almost like we practice this, even though we don't have a scripted question, because as you were talking and explaining all this, how do we do it? So we spent last year preparing our strategy for CX, for SAP CX, right? And part of the strategy was try to understand how do we shift away from doing features and functions, which is like, like you said, the latest technology. It's not the way to win. You can have 5,000 features, but if it's not the right one, it doesn't matter. If for example, you were mentioning the contact center before, right? If I need a part of the contact center app to manage chat and I don't have chat, it doesn't matter what 5,000 other features I have because you don't have what I need, right? So it's not about the number of features and functions. It's about, like you said, understanding the customer. So part of doing the strategy that we set up again last year, we set the strategy for CX, was trying to understand the model that we need to deliver to our customers, to the people that buy the software from us, right? And we came up with the concept that we need to focus on like, three core activities: understand the customer, engage with the customer, and deliver to the customer. And if you think about it, right, any technology can align anywhere in there. But it's not about the technology. It's about how do I understand the customer? How do I start with customer data and processing the data and trying to understand you? How do I know that, for example, you like the color mauve, which is the color of your shirt? My perception of colors, may be wrong. But how do I understand that you like the color mauve? I was going to say purple, so, mauve sounds better.
Well done.
I have no idea. I'm just trying to be supportive.
But I mean, how do I understand that you like the color mauve if I don't actually see you, right? How can I use data that I collected about you, that I collect through social media, through different channels, through aggregation, from partners and so forth? How can I use that to understand that you like the color mauve, right? And once I understand that you like the color mauve, how can I engage with you to have an interaction or a conversation about the color? And then, once I do that, how can I deliver to you that color in the products that you want? So items like personalization stem from that process of understanding, engaging, and delivery, right? Items like, retention stem from understanding, engaging, and delivering. Whether you're talking about service, I understand what your problem is, I engage with you to get more information, and I deliver an answer. Or you're talking about sales, or you're talking about marketing, it doesn't matter. Understand, engage, and deliver. So this is the model that we actually realign all our products and our strategies in the last year. This is how we go into market. Instead of having more features and functions, which you can never have enough and really don't make the difference, we're trying to figure out, what's the business model, the business outcomes that we're going after, and that's why we're going with understand, engage, and deliver.
I'm trying to think about an example from my own life because quite often I think there is a kind of a disconnect between gathering all the data that we can find about the customer and then engaging with this customer in a meaningful way.
What happens sometimes? For example, I'm getting a bad service from a company. Let's not point fingers or anything, right? I'm not happy with the service. Then I'm calling the hotline and saying, hey guys, you've delivered this stuff to me, and first I didn't order it. Second, your web page wasn't working for me to cancel the order. Third, you brought me stuff that I'm allergic to. So this is a big problem, right? What are we gonna do about it? And the agent tells me, oh, we are very sorry, but because you already got this thing, we cannot do anything about it. So you can have a 10% discount for the next order. I'm like, you must be kidding me. This is not what I expect at all. So just for your information, I'm super unhappy about this, and I'm super unhappy about the resolution. So I'm not going to have any business with you from now on. He's like, okay, sorry, but this is all I can do for you. Then 3 days later, I get an email, so the standard marketing email from the company, hey, we haven't heard from you lately. Are you okay? Are you happy with our products? I'm like, no. Why? And it's not I'm being unhappy, and I'm never talking about it, like in these really bad jokes about like family life and stuff. Like, are you okay? No. Like, yes, I'm fine. But like in this case, like I stated like on the phone to the agent what exactly I'm not happy about, what's the problem, asked for a solution. They didn't do anything, and then there's like a huge gap between this agent who has all the information, and probably like this information must have found its way to the system, and then like a marketing software team, whoever is sending those like standard emails, like totally, well, customized with my name maybe, right? But like absolutely having no idea what's actually going on with me. And I think like my case was like only one of thousands of cases out there. So like if we have all the data about the customer, like how make sure that we actually not just like pile it somewhere on the shelf virtually, but use it to provide the best service possible for our customers.
Man, you should go before any of our salespeople into any of our accounts and create the problem, because this is exactly the problem that we're trying to solve, right? I mean, seriously. Here's the worst part. In the example that is just quoted, not only do you get an email asking if you're okay, but you get an email with a coupon for 30% off the item that is just bought. So now, not only you don't get to use it, but you can get not to use it cheaper than before, right? So the problem with this, the problem with this is the misalignment of the different functions, right? You mentioned marketing and service. Traditionally, marketing and service have not been aligned. So if you call with a problem, I should be able to know that in your account, so I don't send you, like in your case, an email saying, are you okay? We haven't seen you in a while. We miss you. Hey, here's a coupon for the product you just purchased, cheaper though, right? So that misalignment of data is what we are trying to solve. And that misalignment of data is what companies all over the world are trying to solve. I mean, you heard of concepts like, the customer data platform and like, master data management and things like that. It's about not just aggregating all the data, but begin to understand the data better and begin to understand what it does. And this is the result of the years, 10, 15 years that we spent doing digital transformation, right? There was a lot of noise being made last year about how companies had to go digital because of the pandemic. In reality, companies have already been digital. Most of them are working on like, second or third generation digital concepts. We've been investing for the last 10 plus years in understanding the data we collect and what we can do with it. Right? How do we sell the data from service into marketing so marketing makes better decisions? How do we sell the data from marketing to sales so sales make better decisions? And how do we create this end-to-end data flows that we didn't have before? And this is what digital transformation it's been about. It's not been about making sure everything happens online or having more data, but understanding what the data does, where it comes from, how it's used, and where it goes. And when you get into that mind frame, then customer experiences become much more interesting, right? This is the difference between, in the old days, customer experiences were created by the company and suffered by the customer, right? And now you have a company that, using the proper data, can give you, the customer, the ability to create your own experience any way you want by exposing the right data to the right processes, so you can actually, go online and say, hey, this material is actually not good for me, it's allergic for me, so then we won't offer you anything with that material. That's the difference between where we are today and where we were 10, 15 years ago in the concept of CX. Building these experiences require an understanding of the customer that we didn't have before, requires better management of the data, and requires engagement to connect the dots between what you sell to service and what we're doing in marketing.
I think you just answered one of the questions that I had in mind to continue our conversation. And remember, we had a talk a while ago off record, and you mentioned something along the lines that companies cannot control customer experience. And then I was thinking about it. Why would we even bother, or why would we even care?
But I guess the answer is that we are helping customers to create their own experiences, right? Or
exactly, yeah. That's all we can do. Think about it. Think about it this way. Let's say that you want to go on vacation, right? And you want to go to Machu Picchu.
Oh yes, I do.
Okay, there you go. Who doesn't, right? I mean, come on. So you found online a tour that has the best Machu Picchu experience. Okay. And the best Machu Picchu experience starts from taking an airplane, taking a flight out of LA to Lima, Peru, in tourist class, right? Arriving in Lima, Peru, staying in a 3-star hotel, and then connecting from the airport to the hotel on a bus, and then we take you by taxi to the train station, and then you go to Machu Picchu by train in like tourist class. That's not the best experience. That's one experience. You want to customize that. You don't live in LA, so how can the best experience start in LA? How do you get to LA, right? or maybe you don't really appreciate the fine art of navigating a bus from the airport to the hotel. Or maybe the hotel needs to be a little bit more than 3 stars, so you actually really experience the being in Lima. So as you start putting all these pieces together, you realize that the best experience is not made by the tour operator, but it's made by you. So now you get to take off, you get to leave from London direct to Lima, Peru. You get to actually take a taxi from the airport to the hotel. You stay in a nicer 4-star hotel, and you get a private transport by limousine from the hotel to the train station. Now that's your experience, and that's not the ultimate experience, because if behind you or in the same tour there's a person who's a student, they would prefer to go the ultra cheapest flight that they can find, because you have to fly over there, right? Walk from the airport to the hotel because it's not that far, and the hotel maybe is a hostel for students. So the difference is we each make our experience what needs to be the ultimate experience, right? And when companies are dead set into the only way you can do this is leave from LA, take a bus and stay in this hotel, then you're not creating an experience, you're creating a forced event that customers may not appreciate. So given the flexibility, given the dynamicity to actually have a customer create their own experience by providing options, providing access to these options, and by understanding you better, create a better experience for you, that's what we're trying to create with CX. It's not about creating experience, it's about how do we create the better infrastructure, the better number of options, and the better understanding of the customer, so we can align your who you are with these options that we have.
Okay. In this case, customer experience is very different from customer service, I guess, because sometimes these two terms, they used interchangeably, and I think the way that you are talking now about customer experience, they are miles apart.
Yeah. Well, customer service is not experience. Customer service has interactions, right? So you call because you're having a bad problem with your TV, and it gets resolved. That's a customer service interaction, but an interaction doesn't make an experience. Your experience started the moment that you actually decided you needed to buy a TV, and then you start investigating what TV you're going to buy, and then you purchase a TV, and then you use it, and then you get a service, if it's something, and then you actually potentially even upgrade and buy another TV from the same manufacturer. That's an experience. It needs to be end-to-end. It cannot be a single interaction. If you tend to the interactions, if you manage the interactions as a company to do the best thing you can do, overall, over time, all these multiple interactions become an experience. But you cannot manage an experience any more than you can manage, you cannot tell a cat what to do. You cannot tell a customer how to act. That's basically the same.
Yeah, here's your TV and now you should be happy.
Yeah, now you should be happy because I answered the phone right away. Yeah, but you sold me a product that doesn't work, that arrived 6 weeks late and is broken when it got here, Why am I going to be happy because you answered the phone right away? You're missing the point here.
Yeah, exactly. And let's talk maybe about 3 biggest myths about customer experience. So we already know one. Companies cannot control customer experience, so the best thing we could do is create the infrastructure and make sure that customers can get and create their own experiences while interacting with us as a company. What do you think if we start misspelling some other myths? What are maybe 2 other examples that you could give?
The second one is what you just mentioned. A single interaction makes a customer experience. Right, using the terms interchangeably. This is one like you said earlier. This is when you say, well, I'm going to build an experience for you through customer service. No, you can build a good interaction through customer service, but it's not an experience. Learn to differentiate between a single interaction and an end-to-end experience. Right. So you need to create great interactions, and then they will build up to experiences. But you cannot say that one-time interactions is an experience. Because this is one of the biggest problems that we have in customer experience. In when we talk to our customers, they still believe that a single interaction constitutes a whole experience. So then they say, if you don't provide your customers a great experience, they'll leave you. Well, first of all, no, they won't. But, second of all, you cannot provide them a good experience because you can provide a great interaction that builds up to experience. It's the same as saying, okay, when you go dating, you go on a first date, you had a great first date, so you're married, right? Well, no, there's a few more steps between that, right? I mean, yes, you answer the phone in an hour, but that doesn't mean that like I'm committed to you for the rest of my life, So let's learn to differentiate between dating and engagement and marriage before we actually think that like it's all one thing. So customers build their own experiences, company don't. Interactions are not experiences, and you can manage the interactions. And third is where we started this conversation, which is the concept of if you don't understand your customer, if you don't understand what they're looking for, and you don't lay out the right conversation or the right interaction, you're never gonna achieve what you want to achieve. So understand your customer, understand what they're trying to build as their experience, and deliver a great interaction, and the three of them eventually become into an experience.
Yeah, you just mentioned that one bad interaction with a company is not going to be a deal breaker for the customer.
Correct.
But I'm thinking, we cannot name any names, but if we talk about the worst thing a company could do in terms of customer experience, what would it be?
First of all, every single customer will have their own breaking point, right? Some people will do it. I mean, I do this all the time. I'm sure you do it as well. You find something online that sounds interesting, and you go to sign up, and then it's a very complicated process that asks you, your daughter's last name, before 3 lives ago, and the color of your cat's hair, and and you go like, this is preposterous. There's no point to this, so I'm not going to sign up, or I get past a simple sign-up experience, then ordering becomes, I finish the order and they say, oh, by the way, your products cost $20 and we'll charge you $40 for shipping. And you go like, oh, come on, seriously? Not going to happen, right? So every person has their own breaking point. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, how do you create a better experience? Is by understanding your customers and providing for all the different, the whole spectrum of what they're looking for, right? Some customers are okay, with a slower process to sign up as long as the shipping is faster. Some people expect free shipping. So you got to provide for all these things, understand your customers and provide for all things, right? There's a horrible statistic that people keep repeating as if it was, gospel, which is 86% of customers will leave after one bad experience, which is not true. Because, I mean, think about how many times you said, I'm done, I'm leaving, this is horrible. And then you realize that the process of changing what you have is a nightmare, right? I can think of banking and cable and electricity and cell phones and airlines and hotels and whatnot. So customers don't change that quickly. They just want to be better understood and better catered to. So, understanding the customer is the key part to all this is more than anything. Once you understand, then being flexible with what you offer is the second part of it, right? We all have cell phones, of course, by now. We all have multiple cell phones in some cases. We all have multiple interfaces. We may have a tablet and a cell phone and a TV and a computer. And in some cases, all 4 of them may be on at the same time while you're watching a program and doing searches. So understand that, there's more than one way to communicate and to track. So then, understand where your customer lives and what they do and what information you can collect and how you're going to use it, right? So that's the second part. We understand the customer, we track the right information, we connect through the right channels, we do the right things. And then the third is match your competitors. Gone is the time when you said airline number 1 didn't work for me, so I'm going to use airline number 2. Guess what? Both airlines are probably horrible, and now there's a third option, which is private travel, which is actually quite affordable in some cases, which is the fourth option, which is the train in some cases, or a bus that will make the same thing. So as it becomes as your competitors expand and they're more diverse, you cannot just do what you used to do, try to match only your closest competitor. One of the biggest problems we have today, and I'm going too long, so I'll shut up after this, but one of the biggest problems we have today is that we are no longer compared to our competitors, but we're compared to Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. I did an event a couple months ago, and we asked everybody, there were a bunch of companies, and these were executives, and I asked everybody, who's the biggest, who do you admire the most, and who is your biggest threat? And in both cases, everybody said Amazon. You know, so it's interesting because they're so pervasive, and what they do drives change across the entire market. So you need to understand where your market is and what things are happening, so you can actually adapt to that, right? So you're not going to be like doing this close-minded, I'm a company that does this and this is what I'm going to do. You got to be very broad in what you do and understand the entire environment, your customer, their needs, and provide the best interactions.
Okay, yeah. And I guess, yeah, for all the retails and stuff, Amazon is a competitor. And for us in our interview, it's TikTok, because people will have to decide whether they want to watch some funny videos or our conversation. All right.
Hey, we have some great stuff here that you can just chunk it to like TikTok, 30 seconds or 20-second videos. Okay.
Yeah, I have an account on TikTok. I could add some music and cut some videos for us.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I have an account of everything imaginable. So every social network out there. I might not actively use it, but I want to know what's happening and how other companies are using it. And maybe think about some ways for our marketing team to use some of the best practices. And though we are perceived as a serious company, nevertheless, I think it's always great to have some fun, and even if it is on TikTok.
I completely agree, and the same thing applies. In staying in the vein of the conversation, the same thing applies to experiences. Is there any way that you can deliver service or marketing via TikTok? Then why don't you do that, right? That's the key to understanding what our customers are, how they engage, and what they're looking for. Some customers may be looking for like 20-second snippets versus like 20, 25, 30-minute conversation.
Yeah. Which reminds me, we had another interview, I think, in autumn with some guests, and we were talking about the concept of customer freedom, and there was a suggestion that we should be where our customers are. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't.
Okay, why?
I don't because I mean, it again. If you have 1 million customers, the chance that all 1 million customers will be in the same place is non-existent. So if you're going to be everywhere your customers are, you're going to end up spreading yourself too thin and trying to manage and deliver interactions across too many channels and too many different things. I mean, you're much better off by focusing on creating and delivering the best infrastructure, and then allowing people to come in through different channels that are trying to be engaged in that. I mean, we were just talking about TikTok, right? I'm not on TikTok. I have a face for radio, they tell me, but I'm not on TikTok. And I probably won't be in TikTok anytime soon, even though people may want to get theirs. But somebody smart might come along and take this content that we're creating and chunk it up into TikTok size, videos and put them on TikTok. So my goal here is not to be on TikTok, but to create the best content possible, right? Having this conversation and finding ways to disseminate this information and this conversation through many channels, that's what I'm trying to do. But that doesn't mean that I have to be everywhere. It just means that I focus on what I do best. I do a great conversation best. Retail company does a great selling transaction through commerce. An airline or a hospitality company does a great job of getting you to point A to point B. If your airline is not on TikTok, doesn't mean that you're not engaging with your customers, right? All it means is it's focused really well in what it does the best, and then finding ways to actually address the needs of customers. You cannot be everywhere the customers want to be. You're much better served, and actually there's studies that have been conducted all over the place over this. You're much better served doing one thing right through one channel than the same thing wrong in 20 different channels.
Let's talk about another term, customer-centric. I think we started our conversation somewhere around this topic already. Remember when we were talking about shifting the focus from ourselves and our products and features towards the customer? But I see a bit of a challenge here, because at the company, we want to be customer-centric, but at the same time, we have to stay flexible, because we have a lot of customers from all the different industries, right? And we need to cater to their needs, and we just have a fixed set of products. On top of that, we also have to balance with our own KPIs, keeping employees happy, having the revenue grow, right, being successful in the market, and be a growth company as well. How can we play with all these different aspects together? What do you think?
You said it better than I could. I mean, the problem with being customer centric is when you make your whole mission in life to deliver to the customer and nothing else, you leave behind the business. When you make your whole mission in life be a good business, you leave behind the customer, right? So then, how do you reach this balance between customer expectations and needs, and company needs? How do you get to the point where, like, you understand your customers and you deliver what they need, but without giving away the business? That's what being customer centric is. When we first tried customer centricity in the early 2000s, we thought that it was about giving everything to the customer, and we did that. We just said, "Oh, the customer is the king. They're never wrong. Let's give them everything," right? And it didn't work because we left behind business outcomes that were necessary, results that we couldn't deliver, metrics that were not met for our continued growth. And as a result, we learned that we had to find the balance between what the customer demands and what the business needs. And then the place where those intersect is customer expectations, right? So what your demand, what I need, I know your expectations, I meet the expectations, that's a successful interaction. And that's what we're trying to do, is like, create the successful interaction. So learning the expectations of the customer, meeting the expectations of the customer is what it's all about. So customer centricity is really, really simple. I understand who you are and what you need. I deliver what you need within the realm of my business. We both get value out of it. That's a successful interaction. We did that right. And I focus on your needs. I focus on my needs, and then we both got something. And by the way, this is not like, mad science. Everything that we're talking about is actually part of behavioral economics and behavioral science. I mean, we as humans behave in a certain way, whether we are talking to a company or talking to another human being or talking between two people. And understanding those behaviors and translating those into business interactions, that's what actually makes for a very successful customer experience.
Yeah, so the philosophy is I give you something, you give me something, and everyone is happy. And I suggest on this positive note, we conclude our interview. Esteban, Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really fun talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. My pleasure. It was fun. So thanks for having me, and glad to come back any other time to talk some more about trips to Machu Picchu or whatever.
And the audience, for all the additional information, you can go down to the description. Stay tuned for more great topics to come. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss anything. Spread the word and let us know what you think using the hashtag #DCXShow. That's it. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Bye-bye.